Welcome back. My name is Matt Reiners, and I'm the co-founder of Eversound, which was recently acquired by Uniguest, a company committed to developing engagement technologies to help communities connect and improve the quality of life for older adults. Today, I'm joined by the famous Murry Mercier, the Senior Living Market Director at PointClickCare. Murray started out in the senior living side, as on the provider side, as a network administrator, IT site manager, assisted living administrator, and resident care director. Murray then joined Point Click Care over 10 years ago and has worked his way up to help leading the senior living division at PCC that empowers over 30,000 skilled nursing centers, senior living communities, and acute and payer partners. Thanks for joining me today, Murray.
Hey, thanks, Matt. I feel like this conversation's been a long time coming.
It has. I feel like when we first started talking about it, I had some level of hair on my head, but hey, who's counting, you know?
Could have been.
Yeah. So, Murray, I kind of walked through a little bit of your journey there, but I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about your background and how you got into senior living.
Sure. And it's a rather unsuspecting story. I have been in and around senior care settings since 1981, essentially when I was born. Um, I'm a third generation professional in the space of senior care. My grandmother was a nursing home administrator. So when my parents didn't have childcare from time to time, I would go with her to the setting. And when you're introduced to things at a young age and you just kind of grow up alongside them, it's a much different experience. I don't care if it's sports or science or arts or theater or something like that. You have a much different perspective of it because you were able to soak it in from such a expecting young age. You know what I mean? Like, it's just something that you just absorbed. And when you're little, you look at things from a very positive light because you haven't been introduced to the negative side of things. And that's what I did. When I walked into a nursing home in 1981, which you can expect isn't exactly the most visually vibrant of places to see. I didn't smell the bleach. I didn't see the wheelchair lines into the shower room. I didn't see the wheelchair ties. I saw 65 older people letting me climb all over them and passing me candy and watching television. I had a much different experience in this setting that really led into my passion for aging services. And fast forward a bunch of years, I was taking a gerontology elective in college just offhand. I'm like, I like old people. This will be cool. And I walked into what was a Sunrise senior living community at the time, and it was completely different, right? It was vibrant. It didn't smell like bleach. There were activities happening, and I think we even planned a dance for Christmas during our class. And I was like, this is way better, and I want to be a part of this revolution of making senior living something that people actually want to engage with, a place where somebody might actually want to live and definitely want to work. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, just thinking of that, I mean, I've got a daughter who's 2.5, and imagine her in a senior living community. Yeah, it would be like heaven for her. Just like getting whatever she wanted, doing whatever she wanted, just ultimate
Yeah.
candy just being fed. So yeah, I could definitely understand seeing that positive light. Um, and I know when it comes to senior living, you're one of the experts, and I know when it comes to this entire industry, you've got a great kind of snapshot of everything and anything. And why I want to take this conversation today is, as we all know, senior living communities are currently mostly supporting cognitive and physical needs, but what additional services could they offer, and why should they?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that, you know, the purpose of senior living communities or nursing homes or long-term care centers is, from a general public perspective, perceived as a place where that you go when you need physical or cognitive support, and that you don't want that type of living environment until you need those things. But the reality is much more dynamic than this, and it has been for a long time, even thinking back to being a toddler in a nursing home in the 80s. But it needs advocates. It needs people that believe in the power of people, essentially. Overall, when you're looking at what kind of services you want to offer if you're a senior living operator, just thinking about ways of integrating people back into their daily lives. Uh, Senior living doesn't need to decide between hospitality and healthcare. And in fact, it would be a bad outcome if you did just choose one of those areas. The fact of the matter is that, We are hospitality providers. We are healthcare providers. We're total wellness providers, music and art providers. All the cool things about senior living, one of the cool things about senior living is that it can be designed specifically for the region and population that it's serving. So ultimately, unlike nursing homes that are federally regulated and the services are federally identified, in senior living, we've got a lot more flexibility to meet the needs of the people that are actually in our community. So at best, just turn to the people in your community and say, hey, what are you interested in? What services do you need? And you'll find your answer.
Yeah, so you bring up a lot of opportunities there that I think, we're kind of stuck in this mindset at times, but I think we need to kind of expand upon that and what we can really do to improve that quality of life. And I know one of the things you're super passionate about too is, this idea of value-based care. And I'm wondering if you can explain that concept and how it's expected to evolve by 2030, particularly in relation to Medicare and how you see that as really an unprecedented opportunity for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very large topic, and there's lots of materials out there. So I definitely encourage any of the listeners who want more information just to do a quick Google search on value-based care. Lots of great videos that kind of simplify what it is. But essentially, there are three cornerstones to value-based care. And I'm going to explain this simply. Number one is improve the health of the health of the patients, the people that are receiving healthcare services. Number two is to lower the cost of healthcare overall. For reference, there are 820,000 ish people living in assisted living today, and that roughly costs the healthcare system about $19 billion annually. So, how can we start to shave off some of that spending? And number three is, and the most important for my money, is facilitate a better healthcare experience. It's completely ironic to me that when we enter a healthcare engagement, we're labeled as a patient. And if you look up the definition of patient, it's willing to put up with excessive wait times to get the service that you need. So it's kind of ironic for me. Um, in order to understand what's valuable to the patient, in order to facilitate that better healthcare experience, you need to focus on the personal agenda, right? Not all of us want the same interaction when we go to the hospital. We have different agendas. Some people want to get to the highest physical capability. Some people want to maintain a different level of physical capability in life. Traditionally and historically, our healthcare process is built on a fee for service where we look at somebody like you who had a healthcare event like you, and then we say, this is the things that you need to do, and this is what we're going to pay for to do it. Well, that seems excessive in some situations. Like what I want is different from what you want is different from the next person. And so value-based care really brings into perspective the patient's desires, the person's desires for the outcome, and focuses the treatment on that desired outcome. Now, the relevance of 2030 is that the CMS has said that all Medicare enrollees must be participating in value-based care from a healthcare experience perspective by 2030. The reality is that this is really going to go downstream into general population and is going to positively impact your and my experience pre 65 when we do have to use healthcare services.
Yeah. It's almost feels like common sense, right? When you think of the
Right.
value care based model, right? Of like how we can really do that. And great to see that we're making this push. And even just hearing you say 2030, which is like 6 years away, just feels so wild to hear it out loud. Um, and I know you mentioned it'll be kind of pushed out to the general public and we'll see the benefit of it, but I'm wondering what opportunities you see for senior living communities have to benefit from the shift towards this value-based care as well.
Yeah, and I really do credit something I learned very early on in my senior living operation career, which was the most important thing was to have all community members feel like they're deeply known. And when senior living community operations are being done right, the residents within the community are deeply known. They know what kind of socks this person puts on in the morning. They know what time they like to go to bed, what kind of dessert they like to have. So when you're talking about patient experience as a cornerstone to value-based care, Doesn't it make sense to have the people who know the residents in these settings as deeply as possible at the table talking about what the next right transition of healthcare services is? So to me, their senior living has the largest opportunity to prove their value within the community, not only within the healthcare ecosystem, but within the general community. Our friend Bob Kramer, I know both you and I know him from Nick, called out before 2023 that prospective residents to senior living are demanding healthcare coordination as a service from their community. So this really puts senior living in a position that they can actually execute on that demand from the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for those of our listeners who might not know, when you say healthcare coordination as a service, like what does that mean?
Yeah, so I mean, healthcare coordination sounds like a simpler term, but historically, it has been left to the individual communities to to decide how involved they want to be in healthcare coordination that occurs outside the walls, right? From a services offering perspective, the community was just like, hey, I'm going to help you with your activities of daily living. I'm going to help you get out of bed. I'm going to help you get to some activities that you like to do. I'm going to make sure you're fed, and I'm going to make sure you get all your medication. Healthcare coordination as a service means that the organization, the provider organization, is really bringing an investment to that process. They're bringing accountability to the amount and how that healthcare coordination occurs. So it's people, dollars, and a thoughtful scaled strategy in an effort to make a positive impact on the healthcare outcomes for our residents. If you are in and around the senior living world at all, you know that one of the biggest risks to a resident not being able to stay in their home in your community is going to that hospital. But if we're a part of the process when they do leave the community, it's much more likely that we're going to be able to bring them back to their home that they really do love with the people that they love around them. When
Yeah.
I was in the community back in 2007, just a quick story,
Hmm.
I saw the value of coordinating healthcare for my residents when they went to the hospital, so I did not risk move out. I like to keep residents in my community for as long as possible. Um, but that really meant hours on the phone with insurance payers, daily trips to the emergency rooms, the hospitals, the sniffs around the corner. It was really hard to do a high level of healthcare coordination for all my residents and achieve maximum benefit. So value-based care makes that logic just much more accessible and makes the investment real for these communities.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had mentioned some of those challenges you were going through when you were doing that way back in 2007, which is when I graduated high school. Uh, but I'm curious, like, what other challenges besides like the timing or the time aspect really do senior living communities face in becoming these healthcare coordination agents, and how can these be overcome?
Yeah, look, change is hard, and you think change in your work life is hard. Think about like uprooting like the things that you do in your home, because that's really what these places are. They're homes where people come together to live day in and day out as best they can, and routine sets in. People get stuck. Some roll with it, some accelerate, but a lot will fight and resist it at all costs. So really, it takes a lot of time. It takes quality time. It takes intentional investment. I'm not just talking about like going and standing up on a podium and doing a training. It takes engagement. You have to lead. I would frequently refer to myself as the guide in the community, not the administrator or the boss, because I was just simply there to provide perspective and to show to guide the community down the path of what will likely be the best outcome. So I can't say enough thing about that. The other thing I would say is the cool thing about today's world versus 10, 15 years ago when I did it is that technology is a lot further along now. It doesn't make it automatic, but it definitely helps. And digitization and the standardization of data has been traditionally resisted in the community, for better or worse. Communities feel like they're individual snowflakes, and in many aspects they are. But when it comes to the data and the digitization of workflows, I think more about them as foundations of any city. The roads, the power lines, the water lines, right? If all those things are working well as the infrastructure to a city, the autonomy can exist on top of it and actually have more opportunity to shine and to show its value as a community of people working together. So these are the things I think about when I'm thinking about how to kind of address the transition into value-based care and healthcare coordination services.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And I also wonder too, because I think what we've seen more recently is this rise of like the total wellness as a strategy. And I'm curious, how do you think we can continue to promote these total wellness strategies being implemented in senior living settings to really encourage more participation?
Yeah, and I absolutely love this. Another thing I quickly realized as a guide in the community setting was that the amount of touches that happened with a resident, between staff and resident, resident to resident, family member to resident, they far outnumbered the number of clinical touch points, say, my nurses were having with them. And it is really easy for community members to see changes in other community members. And if you provide an avenue for those individuals to participate and give feedback and interact with the total wellness of one another, you end up with a much better result. And again, I lean back into, we're not hospitality DNA, we're not healthcare DNA, we are communal DNA. And again, the demand to pay attention to all aspects of somebody's wellness is going to give you a much better of idea of when they're struggling or when they're actually doing really well, maybe getting better. Something people rarely think about in a senior living setting is that you move in and actually become more functional. But I'll tell you, like 95% of the time, that's what actually happens. Because when you have your basic needs met, like, right, Maslow's hierarchy of care needs, like when you have those met, you can transcend and you can self actualize and you can help others to self actualize. So I absolutely love this total wellness trend, and understand our responsibility as technology partners to help enable not just looking at a financial health score or a clinical health score, but a total well-being score. So that's a big part of our technology development conversations today.
Yeah, I love that. And again, when you kind of think about it, hindsight's always 2020, but when we talk about some of these things, it just seems like common sense, right? Like, how do we really just maximize and give the best experience to residents and people living in these communities that call it home, is really focusing on a lot of these things here. And as technology partners, really prioritizing that, making that part of our offering, and how are we partnering with communities to really help maximize those opportunities and make it a win-win-win for everybody.
Yep.
And my last question here for you, Murray, and arguably my favorite, but if you were to give senior living providers just three guiding principles as we move through the rest of this year, what would you say?
Yeah, that's a big question. I like to boil it down just to one, so I'll share that first. But I do have three on my mind. The first one is just, we're just people coming together to live life as best we can day in and day out. And I know I've said it a few times, but that was just such a strong realization in my operational years that had such a big impact. I just wanted to repeat it again. Okay, so three things. Number one, communities are only as strong as the people within. I have seen the most beautiful, expensive buildings void of any sense of community. I have seen the most outdated of buildings vibrant and full of fulfillment. So make sure you're taking care of your people, like really, like as a human, not as a boss, not as a manager, not as a direct report, right? You're taking care of a human being, and they are more than just their job description. In fact, I commonly would tell my the people I was interviewing for care partner positions, and we called it a partner specifically because they were expected to give as well as take from the community. I think caregiver is an outdated term. We can't just expect somebody to come and give, burn out, and see you later. But I oftentimes would tell these interviewees that, hey, once you get through this interview, if you get hired, it's out the door. I still remember the mission statement of my first company. We share our gifts to create communities that celebrate life. And if you take that literally, you'll see more success. Number two is that progress is fun and perfection is boring. If everything was perfect, everybody would just be like, zoned out, like everything's good, I'm great. Progress is fun. Progress is messy. Progress, like, get down in the mud and like roll around in it a little bit, like, right? Enjoy it. Life is messy, so enjoy that. And number three is have grace and give grace. We are all here to do the best we can day in and day out. Don't limit the participation of the people in your community. If you have a maintenance manager who loves to play the piano or sit down at dinner with residents and have an engagement, that is just as valuable as them fixing the toilet and fixing the leak in the sink. So don't kind of put your employees in a box. Have grace, give grace.
Love that. Murray, thank you so much for your time today and all that you do for the senior living industry. One of the best beards in the game here, but I appreciate you taking the time here and just dropping so much wisdom upon us. So thank you.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you.
If you'd like to know when we post the next episode, make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're interested in how Eversound can help improve the quality of life in your community, find out more at eversoundhq.com.